I'm going to address my remarks today as much to the ladies and the families as I am to the trooper. In 1943, the 3rd Cavalry was reactivated in Camp Gordon, Georgia, and the majority of the soldiers comprising the 3rd came from the northern states, Detroit and Chicago, and Milwaukee, Buffalo, Syracuse, and Rochester, and Niagara Falls. In Camp Gordon, it was quite a culture shock to us because we came from varying backgrounds, and to be lumped into a barracks with 35 different people and very little privacy was quite a change for most of us, for all of us really. And we adopted the buddy system. You gravitated toward one or two fellows, and two of my long-standing friends, Jim Riley and Marvin Poe, are still pals. We see one another quite often. When they got us looking something other than the WWII construction people, they sent us up into Tennessee maneuvers. And Tennessee maneuvers was a very tough part of our training. You were never allowed to go into the tents, or we weren't allowed tents. There were no barns or houses, and we were strictly exposed to the elements at all times. When we came back to Camp Gordon, they figured that we were ready for the worst, and they shipped us off to the East Coast for shipment overseas. Now, the 3rd Cavalry went up into Camp Shanks, New York, and this I have to apologize to the Novi crowd last year, or 2 years ago, when I thought we were all together on the Aquitania out of Boston. They took the Scythia out of New York about a week after we. Camp Miles Standish was our camp up there, and we didn't stay there very long before we got on the ship in Boston Harbor, and then we started our journey across the ocean. I think if we go to the charts now, on the Aquitania, this is the 43rd, the 3rd Squadron on the Scythia out of New York, and I don't know the exact route, but we took a circuitous route in the North Atlantic, and even though we didn't know it at the time, we were very well protected. There was air cover, as you can see here. We're only out from Halifax. We're out from St. John's, Newfoundland. This is what they call the mid-ocean point. There was no air cover in the early part of the war. There was when we went. But at one time in March, the same month that we were organizing, in March of 1943, this here mid-ocean point was just a great killing ground for Germans. And the Germans were killing our people, I should say. Now they sunk, at that point they determined the reason for, or how to eliminate them, and they eliminated 41 submarines in 1 month, which made it a lot better for us on the way back, on the way over I should say. As we neared Iceland, there was air cover from here, Reykjavik. And then Northern Ireland, Londonderry, they sent aircraft out. So you can see that we were pretty well protected, where we had envisioned before 3,000 or 4,000, 3,000 I think it is, straight across, and we were not that far from land at all times. At this, all around mid-ocean, we had a severe storm for about 2 or 3 days. And this is of some significance because that was the storm that wrecked the mulberries that were cement caissons made in England and dragged over across the channel to give some protection to the shipping in the English Channel. It wrecked the American one. The British one survived somehow. As we came in here over near Northern Ireland, the Scythia again went down to Liverpool with the 3rd Squadron. The 43rd went up the Clyde River to Greenock. Now at Greenock, we always used to tease the children about that Brod Crawford used to check my bags. When we landed there, he was in charge of the detail that handled our luggage. If you want to call it luggage, it's barracks bags, I guess is what we would call them. I guess we can go to the other chart now. Immediately got on to the British railway system and went down here to the Midlands, not too far from Coventry and Birmingham. And the guys were getting quite a kick out of this for 2 reasons. First, I think it was the first time that any of them ever saw bagpipes. and we were met at the dock, and they were all laughing, and they wondered, who the hell are those people? But the Germans respected them. In the First World War, they used to call them the ladies from hell. They were that good a soldier. Now, as we went down here into the Midlands on the railway, we were also joking about how they're small box cars and their coaches. When we landed in Kidderminster, we lived in a tent city. This is right near Birmingham and Coventry, as I mentioned before. Now, that was, you might remember, Coventry was devastated by bombs earlier in the war. I think it was around 1940. But we received one of the few commendations from the British Railway, and some of you ladies might not believe this, but you married some real gentlemen, because they said they were the first troops that ever went through the area who didn't hoot at all the girls and holler at the people in the stations as they went through. After Kidderminster, we lived in tent cities, as I mentioned. We came down to a very desolate area, right near here in the moors of western England, in the Salisbury Plains. Now, that's been a training camp for soldiers for generations, and it's also a home of one of the 7 wonders of the world. Now, on one occasion, we were out on an exercise out of there, and I happened to look out, and I saw Stonehenge. And I got on the vehicle radio. I thought, well, this might be of interest to the troops. So I said, Captain, the men, I'm talking to Captain Dupree. I said, Captain, the men might be interested that over on the right there is Stonehenge, one of the 7 wonders of the world. And they didn't know, you fellows would remember, they're vertical stones with, to this day, they don't even understand what they indicate. But he said, yeah, okay, Devine, and that was the end of that. So much for the culture. He had his mind on other things other than that. When we traveled down to Southampton, the buzz bombs were flying over London at that time, but we didn't have any of that. We didn't have any trouble. There were no aircraft. Oh, there might have been 1 or 2 come over our area. But one thing that we often said, we went through England so quickly, and we're heading for France, that on board ship, I was mentioning that, oh, I have brothers over there, and they're going to show me the way around London and everything. We never saw a thing. Tent City, the moors, Southampton, and over across the Channel. Now, the Channel, we were very lucky here. The Channel was just like a mill pond, and it isn't usually like that. As I told you earlier, we had an awful storm on the Atlantic, and we had to drift to the protection of the British mulberries, and we were almost on what they call Gold Beach. Gold Beach was on the extreme easterly end of Omaha, because we landed, the first village we went through was Aramash, and if you refer to maps, you'll find that that's where it is. We worked our way down and through here, and I'm going to point out some of the lucky things that we did earlier, later on I'll tell you. We came down here to Avranches and then made a big circle coming around heading for Paris. Now, we were really looking forward to getting into Paris because the celebration here was amazing. At Le Mans, and there were tours, and I can't remember the names of the other places, but they were throwing flowers at us, jumping up and kissing us and everything, and we thought that, hey, this is great. They were giving us bottles of wine, and one fellow somebody took my binoculars out from around my neck, and I didn't even know they were gone until later on. But I remember seeing one little girl running down a laneway, and I was the rear guard, and she was going full tilt. And her family was coming, but they couldn't keep up, and she had a bouquet of flowers. And I think I stayed a little bit too long, but I couldn't just let that girl run all the way down there and not, she was the prettiest little thing, about 8 years old. And I couldn't let her run all the way down that farm laneway without accepting that. We went on closer and closer to Paris, and it seemed to me that the people were getting more excited, as we were. One sight that I found quite interesting was I looked up from the celebrating crowd, and I saw 2 nuns ringing a bell. and they let all the decorum just go to the winds. They were original flying nuns, I guess, because they were going up with the rope and down, and the skirts were flying all over the place, and it was quite a thing to watch. As we got closer to Paris, we skirted south, and then worked our way up to Reims, and then Verdun, and then this is where we hit the bad stuff. We had things pretty well our own way going across France. There was a slight skirmish, then we'd wipe them out and go on into other areas. But when we got up into the Moselle, Saar area, that was a different ballgame. In the Luxembourg areas also. We took a lot of casualties there. I think in both squadrons we lost 270 men, and I would hazard a guess that most of them were lost all through this area right through here. So whenever I go back there, I like to go around and be alone once in a while and just think about them. In Luxembourg, again I have to digress here, we just came back from there a little while ago, and from the profound indifference of the people of France today, the Luxembourg people act as though the war just ended last week. And I implore anyone who has the opportunity to go to Europe, don't pass up Luxembourg, and don't forget to tell them that you were an ex-GI. One other aspect, after they broke out and we went way out of our territory, way up to Kassel. Now Kassel is up in the First Army area. The destruction there was so different. Everything seemed flat. Now I don't know whether you fellows will remember that or not, but there was no burning and there's no desolation in every different direction. And I thought it odd at the time and then promptly forgotten about it. But only years later did I learn that the British had bombed 2 large dams, and get this, 300 million gallons of water swept down on Kassel, killing thousands of people. And they didn't release this. They missed a third dam, and that's why the destruction was all the trees were down, the buildings one way, and so on. So it was quite different than what we had seen. One aspect of that, if I have time, it was very innovative the way they targeted it. It was a round bomb that hit the water and had to bounce a specific number of times and then go down the wall of the dam before it exploded. And the 2 things that they guided by were 2 cones of light, and when they met on the water, that meant they were the same height. Each plane had this. And then they had a stick. And there were 2 trees on either side of the dam, and when those 2 trees lined up with a stick, that's when they released the bomb. They didn't find out until much later that those 2 trees were just Christmas trees that any German soldier could have moved 10 or 15 feet on a whim and would blow the whole thing. So that was the only part of it that I'm not going to get into the specifics of battles in Germany. I'm leaving that for another speaker. But as we worked our way back, and after VE Day down in Austria, we came back up through here to Camp Lucky Strike. They gave each of us a day in Lucky Strike, or in Paris. They sent us in on trucks early in the morning and right back that same night. Now you can't see Paris in 3 weeks, so you're not going to see much of it in one day. However, it was just to say we were in Paris. Then we took a victory ship out of Le Havre and took a beeline for Hampton Roads, Virginia. Now in Hampton Roads, Virginia, we went to Camp Patrick Henry, and they treated us quite nicely there. They had a turkey dinner, but none of us could eat it because our stomachs were conditioned to much smaller amounts of food. We have since rectified that problem. But after we got to Patrick Henry, each was given a furlough for home. All the men, as you remember, ran to the telegraph office to call home and say you're home in one piece, or you're hurt but you're not hurt too badly, and so on. So I guess that is the end of the chart. If you just want to after the furlough, we went to Camp Bowie, Texas, and did some training, supposedly, for the Japanese War. This is when Harry Truman ordered the bombs dropped, for which we are eternally grateful, and the war ended. Now, I just want at this time to remember the fellows who were lost, and we must always remember them. And I just express the feeling to the rest of you that the best of health to you, and God bless you.